Welcome to Where Are They Now? We reach into the archives of Lenape, Shawnee, Cherokee, and Seneca high schools and invite selected alumni to share memories and fill us in on their career paths after commencement. Since Lenape's first graduating class in 1961, Shawnee's in 1972, Cherokee's in 1978, and Seneca's in 2005, over 65,000 individuals have received diplomas from these four schools. Here now is your host, DJ Dini.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Where Are They Now? Today, we'll be reconnecting with an alumni from Shawnee High School's class of 2004, Katie Murphy Rettinger. Katie is a flight engineer in the United States Air Force Reserve, and she lives in Barrington, New Jersey. Welcome to the show, Katie.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. Let's go back to Shawnee High School 2004. You were there at a period of time in the early 2000s where a lot was going on in the world. One thing specifically that happened while you were in high school was 9/11. Can you take us through maybe some of the memories and how you remember it? It's one of those things that we kind of remember where we all were on that day.
Right. I think I was in my third period class. It was health, and my teacher was Miss Silecki. And I remember being in the third seat back, and a student came in and told her what happened, and I remember she jumped backwards, and we were all in shock. And I just remember going from class to class that day, and the TVs were on, and we were just staring at the TVs in shock. It was sad day.
Yeah, and it was one of those things I remember that it was kind of like a living history lesson. You know, you kind of were watching it, and things were unfolding constantly, and being in a school as everybody's trying to learn, but you also that fine balance of still having a school day. So I guess that was something that you had to deal with. Some of the teachers you remember from high school, you mentioned Mr. Dodd. Tell me about Mr. Dodd.
He was my gym teacher my sophomore year, and he was also my track coach. And I had him all 4 years for track, and he was a pretty cool guy. He was a great coach too. He was all around friendly and smart.
Okay, and Mrs. Zanakis.
Mrs. Zanakis, yep.
Her. Tell me about her.
She was super sweet. She was probably one of the best field hockey coaches I've had. I had her for 3 years of field hockey.
You did field hockey all 4 years, or?
I did.
Did you play varsity starting sophomore year?
Yes, that's correct.
And then you also did track. Was that in the winter?
I did 2 years of winter track, my first 2 years, and then I did all 4 years of spring track.
Okay, and also you mentioned, I guess, German club was another activity you were in when you were in high school. Tell me about that.
I took German as one of my classes all 4 years, and the German club, we met after school sometimes and did German activities, and every year around the holiday season we had a celebration. We hosted other schools, and we sang German songs and had German food.
Now, when you did track and field hockey, were you wanted to focus on both, or were you doing one more primarily than the other, or wanting to stay in shape? You know, a lot of athletes will do one sport to stay in shape for another.
Well, I love them both equally, and I started running track when I was 5 years old in Medford, the MYAA program, and I just loved to run. And I started field hockey when I was probably around the same age, but you can't start playing with Medford until I think 4th grade is when I started playing with Medford. But I loved field hockey and track equally, and I just wanted to be well-rounded and not play one sport year-round.
Did you have an idea of what you wanted to do when you were in high school, or were you kind of college prep and I'll figure it out later?
I really had no idea. Was back and forth my entire life, up to my college point about what I wanted to do. When I was a kid, I was interested in being an astronaut. That's all I wanted to do. And then slowly my interest changed to like cultures around the world and languages. I loved German in high school, so I was thinking about doing German, but then I ended up taking Chinese in college, so I really had no idea. I was back and forth a lot.
So how did you get to your decision of picking a school?
Actually, I was recruited for field hockey.
Okay.
And they also offered Chinese there, which I was interested in learning, so I picked Rutgers.
Tell me about Rutgers, some of the things you remember there, and I know you had some experiences that not every traditional college student has there.
Right, well, I played field hockey for the team my freshman year. It was a lot of fun. We got to travel, but it was a lot of work. I was unable to take some classes I wanted to take, so after my freshman year, I left that team and I joined the club team, which allowed me to take some other classes, such as Chinese, which later in 2007 I studied abroad in China.
So did you go over there for a year?
It was a summer.
Okay.
It was
wow.
about a month and a half.
And then you kind of narrowed down what you wanted to do at Rutgers. When did you pick a major? How did all that work?
Well, I switched majors halfway in.
Which is very common. You only did it. You only changed once. Because that's small. That's a small amount.
I ended up. I majored in geography and
Okay.
I specialized in cartography, which is map making,
Right.
and GIS. And I'm glad I did that. I love maps. That was another thing I loved when I was a kid. Growing up, I always used to look at maps. So I thought it was kind of cool. I ended up doing the cartography route. And after I graduated, I got a job as a cartographer.
I think it's funny that I'll sound like an old man here, I guess, but I think most of the people around now couldn't even read a traditional map. I remember, they would come in books or folded up and having to look up the street name or whatever it is in the back and then find it.
Everything's GPS now.
Yeah, I guarantee nobody could do that.
No.
It's just like an unheard of thing at this point. All right, so to me that's always been interesting. You actually got a job doing that?
I did.
Where was that?
It was at a company in Trenton, and they did historical preservation and archaeology.
Okay.
So when I first got the job, I went in as an archaeologist to kind of get a feel of what the company did. And I had no background in archaeology at all, but it was always an interest of mine anyway. So I got on-the-job training. I got to dig for about a year and got to see some pretty neat things. A lot of our archaeological sites were in New Jersey and Pennsylvania, in the local area. So I learned a lot about history of this area, and then after about a year, I went into the cartography job there and started making their maps.
Okay, and what made you decide to change what you were doing at that point? How long were you there? When did you move on from there?
Oh, I worked there for about 5 years, and
Okay.
I realized I'm just not a desk person.
Right.
As much as I love maps.
So you like the part you were doing before you got the job more than the actual job?
Yeah, I'm a hands-on person.
Right.
I don't like to be sitting at a computer all day long.
Right.
So that's when I realized I wasn't truly happy with what I was doing, and my husband actually suggested I look back at my childhood, and when I was a kid I wanted to fly. So he's like, "Why don't you take flying lessons?"
Did you meet him when you were in school, or did you meet him after college ended?
I was a freshman, and I met him at a freshman in college, and I met him at my cousin's wedding.
Okay.
Actually, we were both in the wedding party.
Okay.
So
So you met and you got married after how many years?
we got married in 2009. Yeah, about 4 years. So I wanted to wait until I was done college.
Okay. So you got married, and then at that point you were working,
Right.
doing the maps, and you decided to make the change.
Yeah, he encouraged me to take the flying lessons. So I took the flying lessons, hoping maybe that would lead me into like a flying job. And this is all while I was still working with the maps.
Okay.
And then
So you were kind of like laying the.
yeah, I didn't just leave that job
Okay.
straight up. I just wanted to see what my options were.
Right.
And so
Because there's still, I assume, there's flying involved with making maps too. I would think
oh,
at this
there
point.
are jobs.
So you might have been
actually.
able to even at that point thinking about maybe putting the two things together or
Right.
whatever. So where did you take flying lessons?
The Flying W in Medford.
Okay. And how long was that?
About a year or so. It takes people different amounts of time, but I flew about twice a week, and I took the winter off because the weather wasn't very good.
How intimidating was it? How overwhelming?
It was. I knew nothing about flying when I went into it, and I just wanted to see what it was like. And the very first flight that you do is called a discovery flight. And you go up, you sit in the left seat in the pilot seat, but the instructor kind of flies for you and just talks you through it. And
Just to discover whether or not you can actually handle it.
right. And it was my first time in a small plane. It was 2 seats.
Oh yeah, you're used
So
to
it
being
was-
in the.
It was bumpy. It was
Used to flying to Disney World.
It was a windy day. There was a little bit of a drizzle, and I'm like, ah, when we took off. Yeah, it was.
It's a whole different world.
It was
than what you're
overwhelming,
expecting,
but I loved it. I'm adventurous. I've always been adventurous.
So you took this discovery flight,
Right.
and at that point you had already were you committed to taking the lessons, or was that one of the refundable deposit if you don't like the discovery?
No, I signed up just for the discovery flight, and
Okay.
afterwards I made that commitment. I'm like, I'm going to sign up for lessons now.
Were there basics you learned, or did it go past a certain point, past basics, that you got to do other things that, you didn't think you would be doing at that point?
Well, you start off with just walking around the plane, learning how to pre-flight. You learn different parts of the plane and what to look for, make sure it's not broken before you take off. And then in the beginning, you just learn how to take off and land, and just how to fly like straight and level and some turns and stuff. And you progress into more complicated things.
So you only fly like small 2-passenger planes when you're doing your lessons?
Right.
Okay.
Two seats to 4 seats, depending.
Okay.
I got to choose what plane I wanted to fly.
Okay, so then when that wraps up, do you get certified? How does it work for people that don't know?
Right. Well, there's different requirements you have to meet, such as hours. You need to have so many hours.
It's like behind the
Like-
wheel
Right,
hours, but-
right. And you have to log what you call a cross country. So that's like a longer flight that you have to do. And you have to plan it all out yourself. And you're not allowed to use GPS or any of that. It's all navigation by looking at the paper charts and
Right.
looking out the windows. And so I logged a cross country. And then you do a written test. So there's questions you have to do. There's like 60 questions. And then you have a practical test. So
Okay.
you go up with a flight examiner.
So it sounds just like a driving license, except
It is. It's
like
just
on
longer.
steroids. It's
Exactly.
like times 1,000. You passed all that, no problem? That was
No problem. No.
Okay. So then when you finish up, where were you still doing the maps, or were you done doing that when?
I was still doing the maps, but at that point, I was looking into joining the military.
Okay.
And that's when my husband encouraged me to look into military also. You have to take a test before you enter the military. So I had taken the test already, and you have to get a certain score for different jobs. And I wanted to go in as a flight engineer first. I wanted to go in enlisted. So I took the test, and my score was high enough to be a flight engineer. So I was talking to the recruiter about going in as a flight engineer. And the tricky part with the flight engineer job is that you're not allowed, or you have to be prior maintenance in the military or have your private pilot's license. So
You didn't have.
I had to make sure I got that private pilot's license before I took that flight engineer job.
So you decide that you're going to enlist, or what did you do?
Yeah, I was looking into commissioning as an officer, going for a pilot job, and I was looking into enlisting as a flight engineer. And I decided that I wanted to go the enlisted route first and kind of get a feel for the military and learn the plane. The flight engineer is a complicated job, and I thought, if I could be a flight engineer, I could be a pilot too, eventually. So I decided to go the enlisted route.
And what year was that?
I enlisted in the end of 2013.
Okay, so the end of 2013 you enlist, and then how much time did you spend doing that, and kind of let's take the path from there to where we are now. How did we get here?
All right, well, January 2014, I got shipped off to basic training.
Okay.
So that was the start. That was 2 months of basic training, and then after that, I had to go to tech school, which is like a basic flight engineer school. So I was there with other flight engineers from other bases, and that's a month and a half. And then from there, you go to a survival school and a water survival school.
Okay.
And then in June that year, 2014, I came back to McGuire and finished out my flight engineer training.
Now, did you come back to McGuire because it was where you lived, or did you get a choice in that?
Well, as a reservist, I chose to be at McGuire.
Okay.
So if you join the reserve, you kind of choose where you want to be.
Okay.
If you go active duty, they can send you anywhere.
Okay.
So I knew I wanted to be at McGuire on this particular plane as a flight engineer. They send you into the simulator, so you spend a couple months in the simulator learning the job and learning how to deal with emergencies in the plane. And then once you kind of graduate from that, you move on to actually flying the plane. And you're in training there for a couple more months.
So I guess it's again more in-air time, more flying with somebody else,
Right,
same type
with
of thing.
instructors.
Okay.
yeah.
So, but now you're flying the actual aircrafts that the larger aircrafts and things that you would be flying. This is the first time you're going up in an aircraft like that to fly?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So how much more intimidating was that type of aircraft than what you were used to doing?
It was overwhelming. As a flight engineer, I'm responsible for a lot.
Right.
So I felt like I had a lot of responsibility.
Not just the
placed on
flying
me,
part
and-
where you have to worry
Right. And it was a very bumpy day that day. I remember,
about. Of course,
my
it is. Your
first
first
flight
day's
in
always
this-
got to be like that, right?
and I ended up throwing up. I got sick.
All right, so you vomited on your first flight.
I did. I did.
But you recovered, obviously, because you made it. So, what did that discourage you, or because that would
No.
that would turn a
no.
lot of people, off to that idea of having to do it again.
I was pretty upset that day, but I got over it.
Did you kind of just attribute it to the fact of the conditions?
I was nervous. I really was.
Yeah,
but
there's a lot of factors,
it was,
I guess, involved.
It was an extremely windy day, so having a lot of wind with me being nervous.
Plus, with the nerves, then I guess the second time got easier.
Right. It got easier every time after that.
So the big plane, and then you learn all that stuff. Where does that progress you to now? Did you just, you eventually get to the point where you fly more, and then you're comfortable to do whatever you want?
Right. Kind of like with the training in the small planes, there's requirements you have to meet. And with the training in the KC-10, I had to meet certain requirements in order to become fully qualified. So, and log a certain amount of hours to become fully qualified.
Okay, so how did you get to your employment now then, from that point?
The squadron that I'm in now, they hired me to come in as a flight engineer.
Okay.
They're kind of like taking their chances with me almost.
Okay.
You know.
So they're hiring you before you necessarily are ready to do it.
Right.
Okay.
Because I had to sit down and interview with them, and tell them, say why I wanted this job and all that.
So I guess it's all contingent upon you doing a good job.
Right.
During all that stuff.
Right.
Okay. So tell me about your job now. What do you do? What are you responsible for?
As a flight engineer, I'm responsible for pre-flighting the plane. So I walk around the plane, I check for anything that looks out of the ordinary, I make sure everything's in place, and then I set up the inside all ready to go for the pilots to come in and fly it. Before we fly, I also do calculations. I calculate our takeoff speeds and all that, and all the performance data, because our speeds vary each time we fly, depending on the weather and how heavy we are. So I calculate all that, and then throughout the flight, I monitor all the aircraft systems. So the engines, the pneumatic systems, the air conditioning.
Did you anticipate when you left high school and that you were going to be using math in your job so much?
No, I never really thought about that. I'd say science was one of my strongest
Right.
subjects. So math was never one of those I thought I would be using a whole lot later on.
Yeah. So because you don't necessarily think, I'm going to fly,
Right.
but I'm going to be using math daily and doing these things and having people's lives depend upon my calculations a lot of times to make sure they're correct. So those are all your responsibilities, and then once they're done and you get in the air, you said you're still kind of monitoring and all that, but does it still make you nervous every time you do it, or is it kind of just?
Yeah, I'm a little bit nervous every flight, but it just makes me more alert. As a flight engineer, because I'm monitoring everything, I'm looking out for any problems that might occur, and if we have emergencies, I'm in charge of the emergency checklists. So I have to take out the checklist and troubleshoot and read the checklists to the pilots and kind of guide them on the corrective action. So it can be nerve-wracking sometimes if we get any kind of abnormal situation.
What goes into those daily activities, and what are you responsible for?
All right. Well, the primary mission of the KC-10 is aerial refueling, and we do some cargo also.
That sounds scary, refueling.
It is, because there's multiple planes within close proximity of each other. We refuel all kinds of jets, from fighter jets to cargo planes, and they come up behind us, and we have to link up with them. We have this thing called a boom. It comes down, and we hook up the boom to the jet. Or there's also a hose. It's called a drogue, and some planes, especially the Navy planes, are equipped with it's kind of like a probe, and they guide the probe into the drogue, and we can refuel that way as well.
Okay, now are you individually responsible for anything during this process, or?
Yes, I control the fuel flow, where the fuel goes, what tanks,
the minor part.
what tanks the fuel comes out of, yeah, and how much fuel they get.
All right, so that sounds like more math.
It is. I got to keep track of the the weight and balance of the plane with that too, because it's a lot of fuel leaving the aircraft at the time. So
In a short period of time,
Right.
I guess your numbers, what we would call them, would change very quickly.
Right.
And they're changing like the whole
Drastically.
time.
Mhm.
How long does that whole process take normally, I guess, on average?
It depends on what kind of plane we're refueling. Maybe a fighter jet might be a minute or two, and then a bigger plane that might require a lot of fuel could be a few minutes, like
But
5
still, that
to
seems
7
relatively
minutes.
short for like that much fuel. So there's
It,
pretty.
it does. The fuel moves fast. It really does. In the Air Force, there's a lot of like classes we have to take just to stay current with our what do you call them? They call it currency.
Like certifications and make sure
Right.
that you're up to speed on the newest things, I guess.
Right, and just staying fresh in the books. Because as a flight engineer, I mean, we have 3 binders about this thick, and all information that we have to know.
And it probably
So
changes on a consistent basis.
It does, almost daily sometimes. So I'm constantly reading and just staying fresh. And we go in the simulators a lot to stay fresh in there too.
I guess, is there much crossover people that do this and maybe try to become airline pilots? Does that happen a lot?
It does, especially with the pilots in the squadron. A lot of them are airline pilots.
Okay.
On the
So
outside.
okay, so at the same time, if they
Right.
don't. Okay, all right, gotcha. All right, so tell me about. You mentioned your husband earlier. Tell me about life now. You know, obviously, you're doing. You go over to. You're still at McGuire, or
I am. I work there full time.
okay, so you're at McGuire, and where do you live? You know, what does he do for a living? Tell me about your daily activities, what you like to do.
Sure, I live in Barrington. It's out in Camden County. My husband lived in Barrington when I met him, and a lot of my family lived out there. So that's where I ended up after we got married. And he works at SAP. It's a German software company, and they're located out in Pennsylvania. So he travels out there every day.
You have a dog,
Yep,
Odin?
Odin.
Okay. What do you guys like to do in your free time? What are some of your hobbies? I know you still stay active athletically and still try to do stuff like that. Tell me about some of the things you do.
We like to travel, when it's possible. He's a big travel guy, and I am too. We just like to see the country.
Well, you got to go
He's
to
a-
Europe and the Middle East?
Well, I got to go to the Middle East for the reserves.
Okay, so you've seen China?
I've seen China.
Europe
I've been to Germany. I've been to Italy.
and the Middle East.
And the Middle East. Yeah.
All right, so you guys stay active. You like to travel. You say you run 5K races?
I do. I'm not big on running like just to run, but I
Right.
like to run 5Ks.
Right, stay active.
Yeah.
Now you say you're also a member of Team RBW?
RWB.
RWB, I'm
yeah,
sorry.
It stands for Red, White, and Blue, and they do like activities, like healthy activities, like running and cycling for veterans and active duty members.
So I guess you still spend time over at the Flying W doing things?
I do. I fly often. I try to fly once or twice a week if I can. Not so much in the winter, but when the weather's nice, I do.
You said there was an article published on you.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
I am the first KC-10 flight engineer that was hired off the streets.
Oh, okay.
Meaning that I wasn't prior enlisted, so I wasn't in the military before that, and I had no maintenance background. I qualified for the job because I had my private pilot's license, and I was in a magazine for the wing, the
That's cool.
reserve wing, and also for the whole reserve magazine. Apparently I made the cover story of that.
Became
too.
a local celebrity, I guess.
I did.
Now, going back and looking at high school, we mentioned how math helped you out later on in your job and things that maybe you didn't expect. Is there anything in high school that, maybe looking back, you'd say, hey, I'd like to do that over, or I'd like to do that again? I know a lot of people necessarily wouldn't do things over because you lose those experiences, but some people say, I'd like to do this again just to get a different experience. Anything like that?
No, I have no regrets. I don't like to have regrets, so I'm happy with the route that I took.
Is there anything that you could offer to anybody? Words of wisdom.
I would say, don't give up on any dreams that you might have, because my dream as a kid is kind of coming true now. I'm flying, so I just don't give up on any dreams that you might have, and keep pushing when you think when you're discouraged, when things look bad, just keep pushing through, because you never know what will happen. The last 2 years have been a whirlwind for me. I really progressed fast in my career.
Well, that's great. We appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk to us today.
Thank you.
Tell us about everything. Thank you for joining us.
All right, thanks.
We've been speaking today with Shawnee alum Katie Murphy Rettinger, a flight engineer in the United States Air Force Reserve. Thank you for joining us today, and be sure to join us for the next time on Where Are They Now?